So, in our democratic societies that treasure access to information, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, are we more vulnerable to these tools than authoritarian regimes, where the regime actively controls the information sphere?
Unfortunately, I should say yes, because the very things that make a democratic society are its biggest vulnerabilities.
Welcome to a new episode of Resilience Talks. I'm your host, Constantinescu, and today we'll be talking about something that involves us all in ways that perhaps we're not even aware of. Information is something that surrounds us, but also has been used of late as a weapon to shape our perceptions, as a weapon to direct our actions. And to discuss this very fascinating topic, we've invited today Dr. Maria Constantinescu, who is the director of the management department at DRESMARA, and also we're very proud to have her as an associate expert at the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center.
Thank you very much for having me here and for giving me this opportunity to speak on this quite challenging subject.
Quite so. So, what exactly is cognitive warfare? Where are the battle lines? Where are the armies?
Well, this is the first question, and a very tough one, because it's quite debatable. Is cognitive warfare something new, something different from PSYOPs, for instance, or information warfare, or STRATCOM, propaganda? And I would argue yes. It encompasses everything which was mentioned above. And it has, let's say, two sides. An old side and a new side. Propaganda, deception, misinformation. These are not new techniques. They are as old as war. To quote Sun Tzu, all war is a war of deception. So this was used in the Trojan War with the Trojan horse. It was used more recently in the First World War with the Poster War. The Second World War brought propaganda to a new level because the means also changed through radio broadcasts. So the methods are not necessarily new. But what is new, and this is why I would argue that cognitive warfare is not something we have encountered before, are the tools. The conversion between the psychological aspects already covered with the technological advances in cyber, in neurosciences, are making this a completely new type of warfare. And of course, you asked where are the armies and what is the battlefield? Well, the battlefield is in our brains and in our hearts, namely in our emotions. So there is not a clear front line because everybody at the same time can be a victim and also a perpetrator, can be a target and can be an unwilling, sometimes unknowing soldier in this kind of war. So if you have a smartphone, you are already part of this kind of warfare.
So if we're talking about battle lines, armies, yes. What is the infrastructure of the cognitive warfare?
We are hearing a lot during these latest days about energy infrastructure, about protecting the energy infrastructure, food infrastructure, water infrastructure, and all of these are very important. But we are forgetting something which underlines all the aspects of society. And I named this cognitive infrastructure, meaning all the values, the common interests, the shared view of reality, the functioning of the institutions, our cultural similarities, our traditions. So everything which brings us together and forms the fabric of reality. If this doesn't function, then no other infrastructure will function because this kind of warfare targets actually the reality, and it targets the trust, which makes the basis of our societies. this may not be very evident, but we function based on trust. People trust authorities to have free elections. People trust the doctor to give them a good diagnosis. People trust the military to defend them in case of war. We trust our neighbors not to attack us. So
some of our neighbors.
Some of our neighbors, yes. We trust our colleague not to stab us in the back. So a functioning society really requires trust. And this is actually under attack. And this is what makes this kind of cognitive infrastructure, the basis of it.
Are we, as we speak, at war in this new cognitive warfare type of situation? Are we at war without knowing it? Are we going to receive a formal declaration of war like in days past?
Yeah, I would argue that yes, we are at war, and definitely we are not going to receive this kind of declaration of warfare. Apparently, it's not the fashion anymore, even in conventional conflicts, as we have seen recently. We can feel it. We can feel it in the gradual dissolution of, as I said, trust of our communities. A lot of people have this sense of becoming individuals, not necessarily part of a group, but individuals. So yes, the answer is we are at war.
How is this warfare being deployed very concretely? What are the targets being attacked? How can you describe an attack as it happens?
So, as I said, the target is every one of us, and it can target our will to act. It can target the way we make decisions. It can target what we believe in. Because, for instance, if a society cannot agree on a common view of reality,
a shared set of facts,
is not going to be willing to fight for that. And the purpose is not like in classic propaganda, to make you change your mind, to believe something else. The point is to make you not to believe anything at all and induce some kind of paralysis. All the politicians are the same. We are too small. We cannot do anything. So the idea is to paralyze people and decision makers and institutions into not responding.
Can you name an aggressor? Do we know who's behind that? Or are they just forces of society, like forces of nature, that are shaping this reality? So is there an intentionality behind this? Or is it just the way society has evolved?
Well, we cannot say that it has evolved organically in this way. So yes, actors can be identified, and the most obvious ones are state actors like Russia, like China, like Iran, who use propaganda to weaken their enemy. And it's all part of, it's a buzzword, of course, but I'm going to use it, asymmetric warfare. So when a state is not strong enough to fight other states militarily, what they do is to try to weaken the connections, to exploit the vulnerabilities, to enhance these vulnerabilities. So on one hand, we have these state actors. And on the other hand, we have to remember that there are also non-state actors that may get involved for other reasons. If the state actors I have mentioned want to expand their territory, want revenge, want something in the name of ideology, you may have non-state actors who act in the name of profit. And I'm going to mention the tech companies and the people behind them who are not necessarily acting with the purpose of imposing an ideology. They want profit. They want engagement. They want people to continually use their platforms. So it's everywhere, and we cannot say that a bigger country or a smaller country is less or more vulnerable. We are all vulnerable in this sense.
So can you try to hone in more on the definition? Because you've mentioned state actors, and this is something that it's easy for us to understand in the framework of warfare, cognitive or otherwise. You've also mentioned tech companies, but they are vastly different. What is the difference between, let's say, a legitimate case of persuasion, an actor trying to persuade me, that my view of the world is wrong and I should embrace his view. What's the difference between that and cognitive warfare?
Well, I should argue that this is part of cognitive warfare. Sometimes unintentionally, these divisions in the society are always exploited by a potential enemy. But they were created through factors which date for decades. And I would like to refer to an example. After the Second World War, a lot of people were voting based on ideology. They were attracted by the ideology of a specific party. But gradually...
The big left-right divide.
Yeah,
that was the paradigm.
And a little bit of center, so things were a little bit easier to understand. But this model met with limits, and in came the advertisement and public relations. And these people like Edward Bernays, they tried to apply psychological tools in order to guess what people would like from the politicians. And I would argue that at some point we had politics as a service. Meaning politicians promise people whatever they want to hear and people pay for the service, and when the politician doesn't deliver, they want their money back. We want our taxes back. So this is a model which worked very well for many decades, but this had as a result the dissolution of communities. People were no longer voting inside the community, they were voting as a consumer for their own interest. So this created a very big fragmentation of the society in different types of consumers, based on, for instance, lifestyles. These are the vulnerabilities.
How is that different from voting according to class, which is the pattern that we've had since the 19th century?
Well, I should say that the difference is the size, because class can encompass the working class, okay, or the middle class.
Yeah.
More people. But now we have the working class fragmented into a lot of subcategories. We have the middle class fragmented between people who like to run and be very active, others who want to spend their leisure time drinking coffee. So all of a sudden, we look at the differences between us and no longer at the similarities. So this means a very individualistic society. And this is becoming one of the biggest weaknesses in democratic societies, actually. And it is exploited by state actors.
I take your point, but I'm also sensitive to a countercurrent where regional and national identities are becoming more important than in the past. We've seen a separatist movement in Scotland in the way that we haven't seen in the past 300 years, a separatist movement in Catalonia, separatist movements around the world. So regional identities and nationalist identities are becoming sometimes more important, not less important than in the past 20 years.
It's true, but this goes into the same direction. Find the fissure, find the vulnerability, enlarge it, and then promote that narrative, associate that narrative with emotional reactions, usually fear, anger, outrage, and then the bad things are already done. So that would be, very briefly, the mechanism.
The problem is not the ideas that are being peddled, but rather the mechanisms through which they are pushed on people, rather than using persuasion, using the rational part of the brain to convince somebody that they should be acting in a certain way. The hostile actor is going to try to push buttons that are below that level, and bypassing the rational decision-making centers in the brain. This is the problem that you're seeing.
Yeah.
This is the unethical part of the warfare, as opposed to just persuasion.
Yes. And we have this illusion about ourselves as a science has demonstrated that we are actually not, that we act a lot based on our impulses and our emotions, and without reverting to Freud and his subconscious. But science has demonstrated that the emotional brain, the limbic system, reacts in milliseconds. And the rational brain, the prefrontal cortex, reacts in seconds. So we already form an opinion in milliseconds based on our, let's say, more archaic brain. Yeah. And this is an issue because we can, of course, override this. But
it takes time.
It takes time, and it takes foundation, meaning you have to be well rested, you have to have your basic necessities satisfied before you can engage your rational brain. If you are tired, you had a bad day at work, you are hungry, somebody cuts you off in the street, and then you go home and you read, doesn't matter what kind of news, which provokes you a negative reaction, you are more likely to believe it and to spread it.
And it's not even just reading, because reading takes seconds. But scrolling sometimes takes milliseconds, and yes, we're just bombarded by that. And before you have time to react to one piece of news and filter it through your rational brain, on to the next one and onto the next one. It's an avalanche that overrides simply our cognitive abilities.
Yeah, and it's one of the techniques which is actually used is flooding the floor with garbage, meaning expose the people to so many issues, so many problems, so many contradictory statements that they are simply exhausted and they really give up on trying to find out the real reason behind it, who's behind it, what is their intention, and they just go with the flow. What it means going with the flow, reacting emotionally.
Yes, and this brings us back to the question of identity, because in a world where you don't have the time, the physical time, to dwell on the information and to check it, identity becomes the primary filter of deciding if something is fake or real. And again, group identity becomes more important, not less important in this age.
Yes.
And this brings us to the new technologies that are happening at the same time. And if in the past the ability to produce propaganda was limited to the ability of a human to write a story or a drawer to paint a picture, now we have tools like the AI who's doing that in milliseconds.
Yep.
So how do you see these new technologies being deployed in cognitive warfare?
So they are one of the drivers, actually, of cognitive warfare who changed the face of the old-fashioned propaganda, for instance, because they are exploiting our own biology. Biologically, we are not designed to meaningfully engage with more than 150, 200 people. Coincidentally, this is the reason why the basic military units are made of this kind of number of people. Why? A bigger number leads to lower cohesion in the unit. So biologically, it is very difficult for us to engage with so many people. You open your phone and you see their news from all over the world, usually bad news. Yeah. And at some point it becomes psychologically very difficult to take on all those problems, all that suffering, all that outrage, all that fear. So this is one of the mechanisms. Another is related to the speed. Because of this continuous flow of information, our brains don't make the difference. They like the feeling, they create dopamine. When we scroll continuously, our brains receive this as a reward and we become addicted. The speed with which this is happening is unprecedented. And in a way, I should say that this is a war of machine versus humans. And humans are losing it because we cannot keep the pace.
So in our democratic societies that treasure access to information, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, Are we more vulnerable to these tools than authoritarian regimes, where the regime actively controls the information sphere?
Unfortunately, I should say yes, because the very things that make a democratic society are its biggest vulnerabilities. Freedom of speech, plurality of visions, the legal systems which make it impossible or very difficult to pinpoint exactly who is the source, is it disinformation or not, it's a very gray area. All of these are actually exploited. In an authoritarian regime, there is only one voice, one shared reality, the one given by the party or by the authoritarian leader. And even if some people think differently, they will not voice their dissent. So, in a way, this is easier for those societies. One of the issues with our society is that we have too much choice. There is so much information, you get to the point of, what do I believe? What is the truth? The truth is kind of disappearing, and you get so emotionally and cognitively tired that you prefer to just follow somebody who seems to know what they are saying, and this takes the burden of reasoning and making decisions from you. So, yes, we are vulnerable precisely because of these features.
Well, personally, I'm not yet ready to give up my freedom to a Ministry of Information. So the answer should be then in creating antibodies within the democratic societies. Can we inoculate people against the tools of cognitive warfare? Do we have the tools now that we understand the mechanisms through which we are attacked? Are we any closer to devising the medicine?
So this is one way to deal with this threat, and we have some positive examples from the Nordic states. What does inoculation mean? It means gradually exposing people from kindergarten onward to what it means to be manipulated. Children, for instance, at their level, of course, they are learning how to read the news, how to check, how not to trust. But this is not a process that stops in the education system. This should continue throughout the entire life cycle. And this means everybody should get involved. Is not, you have mentioned the Ministry of Information, is not just the state's job or just the educational system's job to counter disinformation, or the security services or whoever else. No, it's a society job, because decision makers need to be trained to recognize this kind of influences, to recognize their own biases, their own vulnerabilities,
and accept that they have responsibility to the state as opposed to just responsibility to themselves to be elected in the next elections.
Private companies can play a role in this, in teaching and encouraging their employees to follow this kind of courses, combining cybersecurity with psychological aspects of manipulation, all kinds of other organizations, including faith groups, including religion. So this should really be a whole of society approach. It works. We have seen this in the northern countries, but the issue is it takes time. It takes time to form a generation of critical thinkers, of people used to technology. And I'm not sure we have this time, because due to the advances in technology, things are moving at machine speed, as I said before.
Yes, and we are not just fighting historical trends, we are fighting our own biology to some extent. Because it is, I'm always amazed at how easy it is for Nordic societies to communicate, to come together around shared facts, shared values. But this comes after a long period where authorities have demonstrated that they have the best interest of the societies at heart, whereas we cannot take that mechanism and just apply it in Romania. where we have in the past 500 years, maybe we've had 60 years of democracy. So it's not easily transported from one space to the other. Then you're talking about a whole of society effort. But who should be in charge of building this new society? Should neuroscientists have a say in how we teach, in how we elect our leaders? Are we going back to Plato, that society should be ruled by philosophers? That experiment didn't run very well.
Oh, yes. I think this is the toughest question. Who should oversee this? Because you still need the unity of command, so to speak. Somebody or a structure to coordinate all these efforts. And I am not arguing for a Ministry of Information to control the information, but I would argue for something similar to what George Kennan proposed, like a cognitive warfare ministry, if you want. An authority who has the power to integrate, to set a strategy, and to integrate the various measures different kinds of groups can take willingly and informed in order to spread this throughout the society. Because without this unity of effort, we have the cybersecurity experts, which are already trying to fight this on the physical and software front. We have agencies which try to debunk, for instance, various narratives. So there are neuroscientists and psychologists who came up with all kinds of studies on how can we take a break from our limbic system and become more rational. But we need to integrate this. And without a common view and common actions, coordinated actions, this becomes very difficult to do.
What is the difference, if there is any, between what you propose and the concept of strategic communication?
The strategic communication concept is embraced by NATO, and I think it doesn't cover all the aspects of cognitive warfare. I should say it's still under development. They are trying to find their footing on what exactly are they supposed to do. Because NATO also has the concept of multi-domain operations, in which the cognitive part is considered a dimension. It's fine at the level of a doctrine, but how do you get it lower to tactical levels? So I think this will be the challenge for the future.
Mm-hmm. So if we're talking about NATO, again, we're using this military vocabulary. A core concept of NATO is deterrence.
Yes.
We raise the cost of any potential attack so much that the attacker is simply dissuaded from doing so. Can we apply the same thing to cognitive warfare? Instead of just playing defense, can we play offense and still maintain our core values, which make us who we are?
That's, again, a very tough question, because democratic societies are not particularly inclined to engage in cyber offense or in cognitive offense, especially due to our democratic values.
But we were good at propaganda during the Cold War.
Yes.
The democratic states won the Cold War because they were better at it.
Yes, and they were better at it because they had something to offer. Their own people believed in the concept of democratic society, market forces, and capitalism, and so on. What I have seen recently happening is the soft power of the democratic states has been eroded. And other states are trying to fill that gap. I'm not referring to Russia this time, I'm referring to China. So they are trying to propose a different model, still in terms of soft power, who attracts different kinds of people more. We have seen democratic societies begin to question their own values. So it's one of the issues.
Democracies tend to go through that cycle, and every 50 years or so, democracy is being everybody's seeing the obituary of democracy, yes. And yet somehow democracies still find the time and the resources to regenerate and come up on top. I mean, in the 30s, everybody was talking about the end of democracy and how democracy was such an outdated model, and that the new authoritarian regimes were meaner, leaner, better. And history turns out proved them wrong. So will we have the resources to push through this crisis again?
Well, I am an optimist, and I would like to say so. But before we go there, we'll have a lot of work to do, and probably fighting. The problem with cognitive warfare is that is, to use again military language, below the threshold of war. So it's not a formal war. The enemy doesn't necessarily have a face. Yes, we know there are bad actors, bad state actors who engage in cognitive warfare, but we don't always believe they are behind such and such and such narrative. So the enemy is kind of faceless. It's very easy to mobilize your internal reserves of resilience and fight when your house is bombed, when your children are killed by a visible enemy. The issue is right now we are fighting a faceless enemy, and I would like to quote again that famous line from Mr. Churchill. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. Right now we are living in an induced state of fear. We fear everything. We fear inflation, we fear war, we fear certain groups, we fear immigrants. Everything is based on fear. We have to realize that we have to move past that, and we do have the resources to effectively counter this.
So to conclude our fascinating discussion, what is your elevator pitch to a decision maker? So let's say you are in the same room with the decision maker, you have 5 minutes. What are the 3 or 4 things that you would advise him to do today in order to make our society, Romania, more resilient to cognitive warfare?
So it's a very tough question in only 3 minutes, but the idea is to try to bring us together, to always insist on what brings us together and not what makes the difference between us. And secondly, maybe empower more every aspect of society. So it's not like people are helpless victims waiting for the benevolent state or not so benevolent state to act on their behalf. To really give the people the freedom to act. So this means especially education. And when I say education, it's not formal education or conferences or elevated speeches. No, concrete ways in which people can control themselves. How to reduce, for instance, stress. One very simple suggestion, now going back to tactical level, is to limit the time spent on social media. 1 hour a day, and then go out, speak with people, try to find out what really makes you happy. And there are a few things that people will find out that they have in common. They want to have a purpose, they want to belong, they want to be respected. So if we insist more on these aspects of society and not on the divisions, which are sometimes very useful for those who want to get in power, I think this would be the way forward.
Dr. Constantinescu, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating talk. And you, dear listeners, will be waiting for you at the next episode of Resilience Talks. Thank you and so long.
Thank you so much.